That's Dr. Clinton Kadochi is a distinguished medical doctor. He's a mental wellness trainer. He's a counselor and a professional speaker. Okay. Currently, he is serving as the mental health director at Lifeline Wellness Connect. He is also a board member at the Mental Health Association of Zambia. Okay. And the area director for Toastmasters International Division in Malawi and Zambia. Okay, that's just a little about Dr. Clinton. For those who have been joining our sessions, Dr. Clinton has been with us for a while, so I'm sure you all know Dr. Clinton. But for the benefit of those who have never heard of him or don't know him or don't know much about him, so that's why I'm reading the biography. So on TikTok, we do have Boruisa Rockstar. Hello, madam. Yes, hello, Barista. You're welcome. You're welcome. Please share the broadcast and likes. Okay, and we have Nancy Muruli. Nancy, you're welcome. White Color Door, you've joined also. You're welcome. You're welcome. Please share the broadcast. And we are starting in a minute or two. Another thing about the doctor is that Dr. Clinton holds a bachelor's degree in medicine and surgery, MBBS, from Changsha Medical University in China, and a wealth of expertise. Okay, Doc. Oh, you're here.
I am here.
Okay, so let me first highlight you, then spotlight you, sorry, and then.
Hey.
Hello, hi, Doc. You good?
I am awesome. Thank
Okay, how have you been?
And how are you today?
I'm okay.
I've been all right.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to this year's Men's International Day. You know, November is one of those favorite
I
months.
can see. It's in 2 days. What have you done so far? What have you done so far for yourself? Because it's the men's health awareness month. What have you done for yourself so far?
So I really wouldn't say for myself, but
Okay.
when it comes to myself, I've just been intentional on resting because you realize that most men do not really rest. We're ambitious. We're ever ensuring that we're doing the next big thing. However, I've been quite deliberate on rest because that is one thing that I feel in the past 2 years I didn't really prioritize more. But aside that, I've been intentional on having one-to-one conversations with my fellow men, just trying to understand and to help them. We go through as men that we don't really have a platform to open up on. So I've had that quest in this month. I've met quite a number of men, and we've had a brunch together, and there's a lot out there to talk about.
Okay. Okay, Doc. So, Doc, just give me a minute. Let me first confirm if the people on the TikTok, if they can hear me. Okay, are those on TikTok? Please let me know. Let me know. Can you hear Doc when Doc is speaking? Because there could be a possibility that it's not connected.
Okay, that's cool.
Yes, so just give me a minute, Doc. Okay, sis Jessica, you're on Zoom and you are on TikTok. On TikTok, can you hear Doc when Doc is speaking?
I just came back here on TikTok, so can he speak so I can check?
Okay, Doc, can you?
All right, testing 1, 2. Testing.
Yes, I can hear him.
You can hear him on TikTok?
Yes, she says she can get me.
Okay, okay then. So let's proceed. Let's go ahead.
Awesome.
Okay, Doc, you can go ahead. Let me just acknowledge the few people who have just joined. We have Mugure Lydia, you're welcome. Damaris Okech, Angel Peniel, we have Flor, Jessica, Kate, Rachel Chege, Royal One, Vanessa. They are all joining in Zoom. You guys are welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. And then on TikTok, we do have Sis, thank you very much for joining. Pretty Ray is my sister Rachel. Thank you very much for joining. We do have Smiles, we do have Scovia Becky, we have Tabby 309, Label. Everyone who has joined on TikTok, thank you very much for joining. You can share the broadcast and the likes. Let the likes continue. Let the likes continue. Okay, Doc, now you can go ahead. You can just start.
All right. Thank you so much. So I'm glad to be here as usual. I'm not foreign to this community. I think we've had a couple of conversations and we have been talking about different wellness subjects. And today we are trying to zero into one aspect that I believe is quite cardinal for each and every one of us, which is men's mental health. Now, men's mental health is important to the men. It's also important to the women because there's a role that a man holds in life general that benefits every other part of life. And if we are able to understand this importance of men's mental health, we'll be able to appreciate men in their categories, boys, young adults, elderly men. We'll be able to appreciate them in their different categories if we understand the importance of men's mental health. However, we have titled today's subject as Breaking Stereotypes because we believe that there are some stereotypes that hold back men from really expressing themselves, of course, because of what we have come to understand as masculinity, and how a man should be able to just operate in the present world. Now, I would love this to be a conversation. Of course, I'll be having this conversation with Coach Rosie, and those that would have different questions, you are free to share them or raise your hand as we continue. But the first thing I would want to start with is just an icebreaker question to my host, Coach Rosie. And this is something that if you also try to identify in it, try to answer on your own. But I want to ask you this important question. And my question is, when was the last time you saw a vulnerable man? And if it's okay with you to share the setting, you can share. But when was the last time you saw a vulnerable man? And what does vulnerability look to you when it comes to men?
When it comes to vulnerability, is expressing their emotions. Okay. So, okay, as soon as you asked me that question, the first thing that came to my mind was there was one day I just bumped into a video. It's not a live, but it was on a video. So there was this guy, it's as if the lady, the girlfriend, was leaving him for another guy. So the guy was actually rolling down on the lady's, pulling the lady's trouser, you understand? And literally crying, asking the lady to just forgive. You understand? I think once the way you've asked the question, that was the first thing that came into my mind. So that's all I can remember. But a guy being too vulnerable, I can't remember. Yes, I can't remember.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I like that answer.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing out that answer. And, the one thing that I'm trying to share here is that we need to work on our understanding of what vulnerability is if we're going to understand and appreciate what men's mental health is. But I would want, as I'm trying to build on that, I'd like us to just have a picture of where men's mental health starts from. Okay, so if we talk about men's mental health, we're basically talking about men expressing three important areas of their life. Okay, so one is about their thoughts, second is about their emotions, and thirdly, it's about their behavior, like their natural behavior. Oftentimes we tell people that don't pretend, just be yourself. But I think we really don't know exactly what we mean when we ask people to be themselves. Because when they are finally themselves, we avoid them. When people are finally themselves, we dismiss them. When people are finally themselves, we shut them up because we are not in alignment with what they are bringing out. We're not in alignment with what they are saying. What they are saying may not be socially acceptable. It may not be culturally acceptable. And so men's mental health is about men expressing the three important parts of mental health, which is their thoughts, their emotions, and their behavior. Now, a lot of men do not say what they're thinking. If there's a man here, he would agree. Because oftentimes what we are thinking is not socially acceptable. And I'm not saying that because we think of the worst things. No. I'm saying that because we have been given a prescription of standards of things to say, to act, to feel. And so men are not supposed to express their emotions. They're supposed to act tough. They're supposed to have things in control. And whenever you find yourself in a situation where you lose control of the thing that is expected of you to lose control, you feel less of a man because you've been told to have control over those things. Now, let's date back to the early 1900s, right? At the time of the First War and the Second War. During that time, men that were part of the war and were experiencing this new form of trauma that we now know as PTSD as a result of the wars and everything, men that would express the symptoms of PTSD, the fear, the triggers, hearing these bombs that they used to experience in the camps after, because they would have the trigger of the post-traumatic stress disorder, they were considered weak and not acceptable, rather not fit to continue battle. And so they would withdraw them. Okay? They would withdraw them from the battlefield because they were a risk. They would maybe shoot when they are not supposed to shoot because of fear of what happened the other time they were in war. So they were withdrawn. Okay? So already that was where a couple of men's emotional issues began. If you express your emotions, you are not acceptable in the community. All right? So the men that were found with PTSD were considered not fit for battle, and they were sent back. Okay? After the World War was done, after the Second World War was done, we had a few men that were now getting into leadership positions, commandership positions, statesmen, kind of leadership. And they desired to have the history of, the war, or just being men of the army, because that in a way possessed what we now call and understand as authority. The leadership that was there in the time was more about authority. And authority at that time was about having a history with war, or rather with wars. If you've never been in the army, you really wouldn't be considered much of an authoritarian person as a man. So that also was an effect on how men perceived authority. And so because that continued for another decade, more men were not expressing themselves, because men of authority, men of leadership required to have things in control. You had to be in charge. Okay? Now, mental health worldwide began to be a norm after 1970. It's a new thing. Okay? After 1970, that is when mental health began to be a new thing. But then we already had psychoanalysts like Sigmund Freud back in the days that would talk about expressions of emotions and that, but they never referred much to men. Mostly they would refer, matters with anxiety, depression to women. When it comes to men, they never referred to that. But the question is, in this period, how have men been coping? Does it mean men have not had emotions? They have had emotions, but how have they been coping with the standardized way that emotions have been accepted in the society or in as far as civilization has evolved? Men and women express emotions differently today. However, it doesn't mean that they feel emotions differently. I'll say that again. Men and women express emotions differently. However, it doesn't mean they feel emotions differently. The depression you feel as a woman, the depression I will feel as a man is the same, but how I will express it is different. Okay. So a woman will express her feelings of anxiety differently, and a man will express his feelings of anxiety differently. Because if you understand science and the research that has been there, men are more emotional in their boy-child stage. That's why if you look at most babies, a male baby, female baby, you realize that most male babies cry more than women, rather than girls. So a boy child is more expressive naturally by design than the girl child. However, because of our society and what we have been taught, we tell the boy child, stop crying like a girl. And so from a young age, a boy is now getting to think that emotional expression is about girls. So let me not express like a girl. But from the beginning, from design, as men, we are emotionally expressive. I don't know if we're getting that. Now, imagine a person who's naturally designed to be expressive to now be cocooned to not express their emotions. Now, because we don't, the second thing is we don't even have the right vocabulary for our emotions. That is why we can't express some of the things we feel. We would rather slap them out. We would rather fight them out. We would rather smoke them out. We would rather drink them in. We would rather sexually express ourselves because the right way of expression has been trapped. There is no door. In fact, there is a wall. There's nothing like a door that has been shut when it comes to men expressing their emotions. The door was removed and the wall is what was replaced with bricks. And so it is a challenge for men today to express themselves because naturally they haven't known how to. This is why oftentimes when people come for couple therapy, because I'm also a therapist, I deal with different people. When they come and the woman is talking about, no, he doesn't talk, he doesn't communicate, he doesn't express himself. The question is, has he ever known how to? Right? Has he ever known how to communicate the way you want him to communicate? There's nothing wrong with communication, but the way you want him to communicate, does he know that? That is foreign to him. You're forcing him to speak a language he doesn't know. What he knows is to express anger because that is what he's seen his forefathers do. The only acceptable emotion in the society, in traditions, in our tribes, some of us have come from, Africa, we understand is anger. Anger is something that would validated men to express. And so when we talk about breaking the stereotypes, I first want us to understand some of the background. There's a lot, even the religious side, because the aspect of mental health came through the church, because before, according to science, there wasn't anything to do with emotional expression. So with the religious angle, mental health was now accepted into the science that we now talk about. And slowly we began to break things down from the soul, the will, emotions, and all those things. Because in the past, it was just casting of demons when somebody is perceived to have an emotional breakdown. They would be taken to the Catholic priest and the priest would do their thing. Because it wasn't accepted in a way to express one's self. Now, there's a difference, and I don't want to get into the mental illnesses that are often confused for spiritual issues, but there's that. And so, because we limit mental health to mental illnesses, which isn't the case, mental health is about the health of our thoughts, our emotions, and our feelings, not about the disorder of our thoughts, the disorder of our emotions, and the disorder of our behavior. No, that's not mental health. That's mental disorders. But we confuse mental disorders for mental health. And because of that confusion, we don't give room for people to express themselves, think what they are thinking, and be able to cope with the different life stresses that come. So that's what I wanted us to have as background information, right? Then when it comes to vulnerability, the same understanding of mental health being about the health of our emotions, the health of our feelings, and the health of our behavior. Vulnerability also falls under that. So we do have emotional vulnerability. We do have psychological vulnerability. We do have social vulnerability as well. So psychologically, we're talking about a person's thoughts, okay? So this refers to a person's willingness to confront their personal fears, their personal insecurities, their past traumas. That's about psychological vulnerability. A lot of men do not address their insecurities, their fears. They don't address their traumas, and this has led to, at times, even divorce. It has led to misunderstandings in their relationships with the important people in their life, because they didn't have the psychological vulnerability to express their psychological needs. And remember, I do talk about the difference between physical needs and psychological needs. So we do have physical needs, the need for shelter, the need for food, the need for all these physical things, right? But we also have what we call psychological needs that every person requires as they are in their formative years. As you are 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, 12 years, there are those psychological needs that you require. Examples of psychological needs are the need to be understood. A lot of us in our childhood as a boy were never understood. We're always misunderstood. So we ended up keeping quiet. We have also the need to feel belonging. A lot of men never felt belonging because maybe they were always confused for a thug, a thief, or whatever it is that was around their community or even in their own household. They never had a sense of belonging, okay? Especially those that were raised by guardians or just other people that picked them up. Then we also have the need to feel seen and the need to feel heard. Oftentimes, there are boys that would grow up, of course, in an extended family, and for you to be seen or heard, you have to do something, right? There are those kids that are considered favorites. So even if an uncle comes, he would ask for that favorite child. And if you are not a favorite child, perhaps maybe something about you wasn't acceptable. For whatever reason, you faced discrimination. You find that your psychological need of being seen and being heard is not met. This is why most of the kids we keep, those that may not be necessarily biologically ours, those that we keep in our households, they are stubborn and they are ever getting in problems. But why do they do that? It's because psychologically they are trying to be noticed. So they will do anything to be noticed, which is why even some of the boy childs, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, this period, they may be stubborn because they want you to give them their attention. When you give them their attention, they feel seen, they feel appreciated, they feel heard. But because maybe there's nothing wrong with this, I'm just giving an example. Because maybe there's only 1 year difference between the current baby of the house and, the other boy child, you prioritize more on the baby and you forget the other boy child who may be 4, 5 years. And so he will start to misbehave. He'll break things. He'll do this. But all he's seeking for is attention. And so he'll do anything to get your attention as parents. Now, imagine if that psychological need is not met at that stage. He will end up doing more grave things to get attention at 19 years, at 20 years, at 22 years, and you'll be bailing him out of jail. And we don't understand how that comes about. So that's about psychological vulnerability. A lot of men from their boy child stage, their psychological vulnerability is stunted. The next is very close to psychological vulnerability. It's about emotional vulnerability. So the two seem to be the same, but the difference is that one is about thoughts and psychological expressions, and one is about emotional expression, feelings, right? So when we talk about emotional vulnerability, what we're basically saying is that it is the ability for a boy child to express their feelings and emotions openly. Can a boy child come and say, Mom or Dad, I feel this, right? And without you saying, hey, would you say that? And so, because you discourage them at an early age, rather, we are discouraged at an early age. You're not a girl. Stop. Go and play with your brothers. Because you discourage us to express at that stage, trust me, we will never express again. We will never express again. So if you understand the issues to do with emotional vulnerability, it's just simple expressions. Mom, I feel like you don't love me. There's a case I had recently, and quite funny. The boy was complaining about the mother being busy on the phone. And the boy literally said, I don't feel like you love me. You're busy on your phone, on your screen. Now, that's only possible because of this generation. Our generation, we couldn't say that. We couldn't. This generation, these babies of nowadays, they talk. So they have that emotional vulnerability, and I hope we don't cut it off. But what matters is how we navigate their expression. The thing is, as adults, we haven't had emotional intelligence. And so when children challenge our emotional intelligence, we shut them up. Because we have not had that emotional vulnerability. So when they challenge us with that, we quickly shut them up. And that is why we find ourselves here with men that are expressing themselves with anger, expressing themselves through a bottle of beer, expressing themselves through sexual misconduct, expressing themselves through substance misuse, expressing themselves through manipulative tendencies and avoidance, because those are the remaining portals of expressions that remain, because we have not had the opportunity to have a safe place to express ourselves. The third vulnerability is social vulnerability. And this is another big issue. Social vulnerability is about being open to forming new relationships or expressing our true self to others. Now, if you look at women have got very good social vulnerability. A woman would complain about what she's going through, and another woman would tag along, even to cry with her. Yeah? Women have excess emotions and tears. They can cry with you, right? There's that emotional, there's that social vulnerability. They're able to blend, not men. Not men. Because remember, from the history of wars and everything, and leadership, you know, the image of leadership in its origin, if you study leadership, it was about being authoritative and being in the army. And people from that industry or that figure were not emotionally expressive. And so when we now come here and say a man should be a leader, what hits in our mind is that I should be able to be authoritarian. When anything happens, I shouldn't talk. I shouldn't feel. I shouldn't connect. I should be able to have the answers, the solutions, and I should be able to provide. That's acceptable. That will keep my woman happy. That will keep my children safe. That's good. However, last time, I think that was last year, we had the conversation like this one. It was men's mental health, and we're talking about how men process grief. One of the people in the audience, when they were asking questions, shared something quite profound. He said that he recently lost his daughter. She died at 6 years old because she had an illness. And when they were, you know, in that process of the funeral and the burial, everyone around him was telling him, be strong for your wife and be strong for your children. This was his favorite daughter, according to him. And he says, a few months later, I think he said about 4 months later also, he found himself in the shower, breaking down. He was in the shower for 2 to 3 hours. He couldn't come out because in that moment, all the emotions he's been keeping, he couldn't contain, and he teared down. He cried. He said, I cried for the first hour. The second hour, I was thinking. And the third hour, I cried again. That's a man. Why? Because he was being strong. Like we are taught. Another man, when he heard that story, he said, me, I was burying my father. And what the people were saying was, give your father a respectable burial, be strong. And he was also saying he was being strong, but one day when he was driving back home, he parked the car and he couldn't get out of the car. He found himself crying for almost an hour. My question is that fair? I'm not saying we should say, oh, men should start competing crying. No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. My question is it fair that we have made men to think like they can't express themselves? So it is wrong for them to feel their emotions. Is it fair? I think it's not. And what I've come to realize is that women will say, no, 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 express yourself. But women are not ready. If a man expresses himself, you are not ready. First, you find him irritating. You tell him, grow up. You tell him, be a man. But all I'm trying to say is that let's acknowledge that men need space to express themselves. And they need to even cry if they have to. Of course, not openly, but be okay with thinking of a man crying. It is not something to discriminate. Men actually do cry. I do cry. And it is not a taboo for men to cry. So if there's a man here and perhaps you need that permission, here is I, Dr. Clinton Kadochi, giving it to you. You're permitted to feel your emotions. You're permitted to cry. Of course, not publicly and it starts trending, no. But the other thing I should mention in helping to break the stereotypes that are around is that we need to understand the 7 relationships that a man should have intact. Now, I've spoken to different men, and most of the problems we have as men come back to these 7 relationships. Okay? There are 7 important relationships that a man should be in control, or at least should be thinking about. Number 1 is a relationship with yourself, relationship with himself. So if you're a man here, write that down. A relationship with yourself. Do you have a relationship with yourself? Because if you don't have a relationship with yourself, you will become anyone out there. You will become anything out there. So do you have a relationship with yourself? Do you know yourself as a man? Because if you know yourself as a man, you are going to have self-esteem. Your self-worth will be intact. You will not be injured by any opinion that a person says. You will not be tossed to and from by any cultural matters that are brought, because you have a relationship with yourself. You know yourself. This speaks to self-awareness. A lot of men are not self-aware. So now this is me talking to men. Huh? So let's have that relationship with ourselves. Okay? Let's have that relationship with ourselves. Then the third relationship, or the second relationship, is a relationship with time. Okay? Your relationship with time. By that, I mean the stages, the seasons. How old are you? Do you understand the responsibilities and demands of your age? I'm not saying fall for peer pressure, no. I'm saying be in charge of your times. So have a relationship with time. A lot of men are lost because they're not in touch with their time. They're doing things that their time has passed. Acting like a teenager in your 40s. No. Have a relation with your time, because it helps to reduce the unnecessary pressure and misunderstandings you're likely to have with your partner and your children or the people around you. So the third thing, relationship with your father, your biological father. How's that relationship? How does it look like? How did it look like? Maybe it's late. How does it look like? How did it look like? Because the impact that our biological fathers have over our role as men is quite high. Because most men begin to do exactly what they hate about them. In as much as you may be saying, I'll be different. But if you don't address that, you are likely to find yourself replicating the very things you hated about. So a relationship with your father needs reconciliation. It needs an understanding. So that is something that we've struggled with for years, but it's a challenge for the men here. The fourth relationship is a relationship with other men. How's your relationship with other men? Are you having fellow men that you can have real conversations with? Because trust me, you can have a wife, but there are some things that you cannot fully express yourself with to your wife and she would understand. Yes, she will accommodate you, but her understanding. And I'm not talking about gossiping, no. But there are just some things that you can express yourself to another man, and another man will understand. He will know the kind of prayer to pray about that, because somehow he understands your perception of that particular matter. So who are the men in your life? These could be mentors, they could be peer mentors, they could be mentees, but who are the men in your life? Every man needs to have a man he looks up to, a man he associates with, and a man that follows him. So your relationship with other men is important. It's good for a balance, and it helps you to be accountable and responsible. The fifth, which would have been the first, but don't worry, the order isn't that much of an issue. The relationship with your woman. The relationship with your woman is very much important as well. Is that in order? Maybe you're not yet married. It could just be a relationship with other women. Do you have a healthy relationship? Do you have boundaries? Are you one who is usually just called upon for anything and you have no order or integrity in your life? So your relationship with other with your woman or other women matters, because as a man, your leadership qualities are tested by a woman. Your leadership qualities are tested by a woman. So you may think, oh, I'm a leader, or I'm a provider, or I'm a protector. When a woman comes in, those aspects of masculinity will now be tested. Are you a protector? Are you a provider? Do you have a vision? Are you able to communicate your vision? Those things are now tested. And that is the function of a woman. There's nothing wrong with that. You have to prove that. So how are you putting those things in place? Your ability to provide, your ability to cast the vision and share it. Because her ability to buy into your vision is also dependent on your presentation of the vision. So those are some things that you need to work on, your relationship with the opposite sex. Then the sixth one is a relationship with your children. That now speaks to your legacy. A man that I'm always proud to refer to is Dr. Miles Monroe, because I mean, there's nothing to fault him about. There's no blame. You know, as ministers, at times we are told that when you're trying to give reference, give reference to a man who is dead, not a man who's still alive. Because if you give reference to a man who's still alive, when he has a scandal, your reference will be invalid. And this is why I'm giving a reference of people like Miles. Look at his children now. So look at the people that he taught. What's your relationship with children? It could be the people that look up to you if you're not yet a parent, the people that are under your guidance, under your influence. Could be your nowadays we have things like followers, but the followers that you know are your children. what kind of relation do you have with such people? The last one is your relationship with God as a man. That's important. It's important. It may not always be perfect, but you always have to be what God says, as what God says of David, a man after God's own heart. Meaning that David messed up, but he always knew that I don't have to station or camp in my mess. I have to run after God's heart. Because whenever you station and camp in sin, there's a lot that will happen that will just get you off your radar. So be a man after God's own heart. Be a faithful man. The Bible says every man will express his good ways, but who can find a faithful man? And that's not just about relationships. And in fact, okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, so my conclusion was actually about understanding, as a result of all these things that I talked about earlier, and men not having the portal or the door, the platform to express themselves. There's now what we call stigma, and that now keeps men bound to keep things to themselves. Now, there are different types of stigma. The first one I want to talk about is what we all know, which is the social stigma. This is the public stigma, when people look at you a particular way, think of you a particular way, disqualify you. That's the public stigma, okay? The social stigma, which is coming as a result of what is acceptable or what is normal, at that time in that social setting. Which is why, if you look at most diseases like HIV, there's that stigma that comes with, HIV. But the same way, there's a stigma around men being vulnerable. And like I said, we are not ready for men's vulnerability. We'd rather shut them up than allow men to be vulnerable. So that's the first stigma. The second stigma, this one apparently it's about ourselves. We call it self-stigma. Now, this is also, I would call it an epidemic, because a lot of men disqualify themselves, especially when they are not doing enough, not providing enough, not protecting enough. When they don't qualify to the standards of what a man should be doing. Maybe they're in a season in their life where they are not meeting up to the expectations. You find that men get into avoidance tendencies. And avoidance tendencies is them not confronting what the issue is, them not opening up, and them just going back in their cocoon, in their caves. And they don't want to address these things. And most people, especially maybe in marriages and just in a man's early adulthood stage, you realize that they don't know how to cope when these things begin to happen. So some become complacent, and the world perceives complacency as laziness. Some become avoidant in the sense that they begin to cope with high risk for behaviors. This is why most youths are rushing to substance misuse. They're rushing to alcohol. They're rushing to womanizing, because these are some of the few vices that we have associated men to deal with their frustration. If a man is frustrated, the society is okay with him being an alcoholic. If a man is frustrated, the society is okay with him smoking. If a man is frustrated, the society is okay with him having a side chick. It is very sad that we have, especially in African setting, really, we tell women, men are like that. Men are men. And so when he has another woman, just try to establish your place as the main wife. But is that how it should be? So there are
expressions or vices through which men express their frustration, but it's just, this is the understanding I want you to have about frustration. Frustration is vulnerability that does not have an escape door. Okay? Frustration is vulnerability that does not have an escape door. Because he can't express himself, remember the 3 types of vulnerability. Can't express himself psychologically, can't express himself emotionally, can't express himself socially. He now becomes frustrated. And because he's frustrated, he now begins to do these toxic coping mechanisms. We call them maladaptive behaviors. Malfunctional ways of adapting. That is what maladaptive means. So you're adapting to the pressure in a malfunctional way. And yet the malfunctional ways men adapt are celebrated. No, men are like that. No, they are not. What we are is trapped from the time we are 5 years old, because we are more emotional than women. We are more emotional than the girl child. A boy child is more emotional than the girl child. But when he expresses himself, when he cries more, as a boy, you shut him up and say, don't act like a girl. So the frustrations that men are now having now is basically vulnerability trapped. The last form of stigma is cultural stigma. So I've talked about social stigma, self-stigma, cultural stigma. Before I talk about cultural stigma, self-stigma is what leads to a lot of men committing suicide. Now, if you know the statistics of suicide, you realize that 4 in 5 men will contemplate suicide. Okay? The same number, 4 in 5 women will contemplate suicide. However, 2 in 5 women will complete that suicide. When it comes to men, it still remains 4 in 5 who complete the suicide. So women can feel emotions as men will feel emotions. Remember what I said at first? When it comes to feeling emotions, it's the same. However, when it comes to expressing, it's different. Because from a young stage, we haven't been given that platform, or we haven't been shown how. We haven't been made to feel it's okay to express ourselves. Yeah, so those are the aspects of the stigma I wanted to talk about. For cultural stigma, it just has to do with what is culturally acceptable, and of course, culture has to do with the behavior, the acceptable behavior in certain demographics. So the Asian culture, the African culture, the European culture, the Western culture is different. But we've seen mostly in Africa, we are trying to adopt Western culture with a couple of things. But anyway, story for another day. So let's end there and let me try to respond to those questions. I think you're muted.
Yes, I've muted. Yes. Okay, Doc. So thank you very much. That was a whole lot in one package. So I just want to have I'm just going back to what you had said initially. So hi, Jay. Say hello. Say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Nice to have you here.
This is my baby J boy. Okay, bye, bye. Let me focus. Okay. So you mentioned that, okay, you were trying to tell fellow men, that it is okay for them to express themselves. It is okay for them to cry. But you added that they shouldn't do it publicly. But what if they become emotionally overwhelmed in public? So should they look for somewhere to rush and go and hide and cry? I think that is still stigma within itself.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
I like
What do you
that.
say about that?
I like that. I think the reason why I gave an undertone to say, but don't do it publicly, is because we are in a digitalized world
Okay.
where we don't have order. If a man was seen crying, somebody will video instantly, and it's already trending. And you will now regret having expressed yourself because the digital space is not regulated, especially now. So it's okay, men can cry, but I'm just saying, cry in a safe space. I think my emphasis is from a concern of a safe space because I know that the public is not safe.
Yeah.
Now, with
Very
the
unsafe.
phones that everyone has, the public is not safe. Your innocent vulnerability will become a laughing stock. The next thing you are on memes. The next thing you are the trending figure of a particular thing. So for the sake of psychological safety, cry, but in a safe space.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. We are good there. Okay. So another, yes, we are good there. So another thing, so someone has asked, Damaris Okech has a question, and the question is, how do you handle biological fathers who have abandoned or neglected their biological sons?
All right. That's a good question, and I think it's a question for a lot of men because this is the reality. What I would want to share regarding that is get to a place of acceptance. And acceptance is you getting to realize whether the person has the capacity to actually realize what they've done is something they can amend or not. The state of certain fathers that have abandoned their children is one that you cannot reason with. A few you can reason with, others you can't reason with. And so try to accept the state. Do you think you can reason with them to have a conversation? Oh my God. All right, let me just continue. Yeah. Do you think you can reason with them to have a conversation to work out that, or you feel like you can't? So when you analyze the possibility of reasoning, then you know whether you should actually even invest in pushing for the reconciliation. It is not easy. I recently watched, I think, a documentary where Kirk Franklin, the musician, met his biological father recently. I think it was this year. He finally met his biological father. And watching that video, you could see the pain, the betrayal, the frustration. This is a man that apparently was even around, but he just didn't know was the father. And over the years, his mother had told him of other men as his father, but then they were not. Now, imagine him getting to see this man who's been here, but he wasn't courageous enough to say, I'm your father. For whatever reason. It was a hard thing. And it is a hard thing even for us. But like I'm saying, get to a place of acceptance to see if it is something that you can get to reason with, or it is just something you have to believe that you will take on to become what he wasn't. So at times we cannot solve or correct the past, but we can engineer and envision the future to honor what we didn't have. But if we can reason, it's always important to engage in that conversation, because oftentimes when they finally leave, when they die, God forbid, we regret. And we stay in guilt to say, I wish I had that conversation with him. Yeah. So if it is something you can reason with, engage. If it is something you feel it's beyond, just be the man that would have a different story for your children.
Okay, that's amazing. So I'll just ask a question. This is very much out of place, but your thought. Okay. Now, this guy who decided to make Equatorial Guinea famous again, great
Yeah.
again. Eh? If we look at
Yes.
his case, this Mr. Belthaza or whatever, Belshazzar or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your thought about his real issue? Because he's definitely an addict. But apart from being an addict, what was this guy really going through?
Okay.
Yes, because I would look at it in the aspect of it could be a cult, it could be this, it could be this, but definitely there is a psychological issue he's going through. What's your thoughts?
Okay. So I have received a lot of questions regarding that, which is why I also addressed it on my page, only that I addressed it from an angle of avoiding, I addressed it from an angle where I was addressing women to avoid such. But yes, there's a lot of concern. Of course, the spiritual aspect is real. We can't, that's not normal. So, of course, there's a spiritual aspect attached to it, but there's also the psychological aspect attached to it as well, because that isn't acceptable. Okay. So, I think he actually falls under, and this is me trying to categorize that kind of, conduct or behavior really into. I've tried to put it under personality disorders, and I've realized no, it's actually bigger than that, because the what he was basically doing is some effect of a particular trauma. Okay. So that is definitely a trauma-related issue. However, it has been condensed with other spiritual matters, which is why I can't fully say this is the psychological issue now. Because yes, would think of him of an a person that has what we call fetish tendencies, or an needful, and all these, sexual related misconduct personalities. But at the back of everything, that man has got a trauma issue that has contributed to actually him even being an agent of such. Because I see him as a pawn, I see him as an agent. There are bigger powers that be, behind all this. But I still acknowledge that it is a spiritual matter, much as it is a physical, a psychological issue. I think you're still muted.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc. Thank you very much, Doc, for that. We are so much past time. Unfortunately, guys, for those who joined from the beginning, we had an issue with the network here and there with Doc on his side. But then we are Africans, we understand, right? Yes. So it's good to have all of you here. For the first time, Doc, I tried. At least I did something out of the usual. I logged in on TikTok, so at least a part on me. Ooh, yes. Okay, so everyone who joined on TikTok, thank you very much for being there. I love you guys. Yes, we will be friends. We'll be regular friends, so worry not. Those who joined on Facebook, thank you very much, my people. Thank you very much for being there. Doc, it's always an honor to have you, always an honor to host you. And thank you very much for being here. I'm sure everyone has gone with something. And in case you see now you're bringing the light when we are almost closing. I thought the NEPA has gone. NEPA is for Nigeria. I thought they've gone with the light. Anyway. Yes. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Okay. So in case you joined the session a bit late, it will be on YouTube as soon as possible. And Doc, thank you very much for having you as usual. So I think I always advise people, it is advisable once we've finished the session, at least by the time we upload it on YouTube, you just go and watch it. Now you'll be watching it with your time, as in you're not in a hurry. You'll realize so many things you will notice that you had not, they passed you or something of the sort. Otherwise, thank you very much for being here. My name is Rosette. For those who don't know me, my name is Rosette. I am a mental health advocate and a coach. Doc has been with us now almost, I think, Doc, we've had had you like for 4 or 5 sessions. Okay, so if you go back to my YouTube channel, you'll definitely see very many teachings from Doc, from childhood traumas to a whole lot. Okay. So apart from that, I am the founder of Hope4Hope Initiative, which is an initiative that rose in the hinge to normalize and promote that it is okay not to be okay, and to further create awareness through education and self-conscious awareness. So that's more of me, and this is our Doc. Doc is logging in from Zambia. We always have Doc. Doc, you're just ours. So it means we'll be having you here and there. So thank you very much for being here. And guys, in case you need therapy sessions, Doc is based in Zambia, but he normally have online therapy sessions. Okay, now with this, our current time, he spoke about safe space. So most of the times, it is difficult for us to know where the safe space is most of the times. But when you're having your session, an online session, at least there is a 90% guarantee that it is safe. Because in fact, most of the time, Doc doesn't even know you, right? So you're just communicating. So from wherever you are, whichever country you are in, if you need any therapy sessions, he's a psychotherapist, he's a mental health wellness expert. In case you need to contact him, he's doing online sessions. And for those who are in Zambia, at least he can do in person. But most of us here are not in Zambia. So he does online sessions at very much affordable prices. So please, if you want to contact him, either you can pass through me and I can share his details, or I can give you his link, his social media pages, then you can just follow him. Okay.